Welcome to the City Show, where we capture the voices that bring our world's cities to life. Today we're excited to welcome William Reusch, an LA educator and entrepreneur, bringing common sense education to the future of the city, something that LA needs badly. He has been teaching in LA for about 17 years, from the worst neighborhoods to the best neighborhoods, or we should say from the most challenging neighborhoods. From East LA to Beverly Hills. So, William, you've been going viral for some of your common sense videos covering political issues of our time. You say that people are extremely one way or another when it comes to political issues, and either you find people that see left-wing people as goofy and woke, or right people as uncaring and unyielding. So maybe you can give us some more background on your philosophy when it comes to politics and philosophies of our time.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. So, I'm a believer in the importance of viewpoint diversity. That the way that we find the best pathway forward, the best ideas, is through civil discourse, through conversation, through learning about what others believe and picking out what is valid about that. So I'm a student of Jonathan Haidt, who talks about phones in schools and things a lot now, but he wrote a book years ago called The Righteous Mind about moral foundations, that one side isn't more moral than the other. We just have different morals, like taste buds. And one of the things he says is morality binds and blinds us. It binds us to a tribe where we have our people, but then it blinds us to the reality that the other side, the other tribe, has some very valid points that can help us understand deeper truths. So I see it as a hack to get to the best ideas by interacting with people. So I try to be a bridge builder, and I try to hear people out that disagree with me. And that's kind of my thing. It doesn't always go viral, because what goes viral typically is something that's very on one side or the other. Trump is terrible, Trump is great, or something along those lines. And I kind of work out the nuance. And nuance isn't great on social media. It doesn't elicit a lot of nuance, but that's something that's been very important to me. So just this week, I had two posts that got hundreds of thousands or millions of views. And it was talking about Elon Musk doing his salute, or his my heart goes out to you, looks like a Nazi salute. And one of them was defending him, and then one of them was kind of highlighting how what he did was not the same as what a lot of Democrats did. So I have people who are on the right who are like, great job, and then people on the left are like, oh, that's terrible, and then it switches. And every time that I do something that's against the conservatives, then my conservative followers are like, oh, that's terrible. Whenever I do something that's against the Democrats, then the Democrats are like, oh, that's terrible. And I try and have people just wrestle with this, that there's really good, valid points on all sides. And what that does is it helps me to understand things better. So whatever issues are coming up, I can go, all right, if this is divided, but controversial by definition is something to be conversed about. And there's valid points on both sides. Otherwise, we wouldn't be so divided in this country. 50-50.
Do you think the problem is that the average person is, and it has nothing to do with their level of education, has nothing to do with their background or what their capabilities are, or what their job is, or what their skill set is. Do you think that the average person is just plain stupid? That the average person is not trained to dig deeper than what they see or hear on the news? And that you just have a certain kind of people, irrespective of social class or social status or wherever the fuck they came from, they just like to question things. They just like to wonder. They just like to dig deeper into issues. And it's just that they have that natural reflex to question things. And the average person just, goes into groupthink and just believes that the group must be right. Maybe that's a fundamental problem with our society.
I think it's a fundamental problem with the way our brains are designed, because evolutionarily our brains are designed not to be correct, but to stay within the tribe. So we're still riding the same genetics that we were tens of thousands of years ago, which is I'm going to go along with what my tribe says, even if it's factually incorrect, because a survival mechanism is in us is it's better to be in the tribe and be wrong than to go against the tribe and be ostracized and kicked out because then I'm at the whims of the wilderness. And we're tribal species. We're herd animals. That's Homo sapiens. That's how we survived more than Neanderthals did. It was because we were able to collaborate a lot more. We're deeply tribal, but we're also deeply collaborative within those tribes. So we are programmed, our brains are programmed to stay within the tribe, keep your mouth shut if it's going to get you kicked out. So we're not actually structured to be critical thinkers that push back on what others around us are saying.
So even if the government is trying to fuck with you, limit your freedoms, take away your freedoms, restrict your freedom of movement, most people are going to buy into that because they're like, yeah, the government said it. Most people are supporting it, so it must be true. And people wonder why, great calamities and wars happen, because they're supported by just mindless, groupthink, right?
Yeah, I mean, if it's the government that you support, but if it's the government you don't support, then you do the opposite. You can't see anything Joe Biden did as positive if your party, your tribe is the conservative Republican tribe. Same thing for Trump. Like there is no good. You can talk to someone who hates Trump. You say like, name 2 or 3 things that he did during his first run at president that were good. Nothing. He gave better access to kidney dialysis treatment. He increased funding for HBCUs. Like we weren't in any kind of foreign entanglements and wars. Like nothing. The economy was good. Like nothing. That's not true. That's like objectively not true. There was a lot of positives that happened during that time. And you can do the same thing for Biden. There's nothing that's all bad. Like certain areas are worse, but there were some positive things that happened during this time. And I think that it's not, it's just as long as it's within your tribe, that seems to be the way it works. And I think that's where the divide is. And what I try to promote is there's valid points on both sides, and that's going to help you understand your neighbor better. And once you understand you don't have to agree with them, but once you understand your neighbor better, and you don't see them as just an idiot or just someone who's immoral, then you can move forward, and we can be more, we can find more compromise, and we can really understand the issues a lot better. I taught debate. I was a debate coach for 9 years. And in that, I would always have my students argue the positions that they didn't support. Because if you go into a debate, it's almost like Eminem in 8 Mile, where he takes the mic and he makes fun of himself in a rap battle and then gives it to the guy. He's like, I just beat you at what your job's supposed to be, so now you have nothing. And in a debate, I think that's one of the best techniques. It's called steel manning a position. We're debating pro-life, pro-choice. If I'm pro-life, I can argue a pro-choice position better than you can, and then say why I disagree. What are you going to do? How are you going to beat me now?
Well, I'm a lawyer, so I can appreciate what you're saying, but it's also keep in mind
right?
the way to control the discourse.
Yeah.
If you argue the other side's point better than they can, you can also control where the argument goes.
Yes.
Whether for or against.
Yeah.
Now, I think a very important topic is the day of reckoning in America, the day of reckoning in California. Very sad, obviously. The LA fires are a massive tragedy. How do you think it happened? First question. Do you think it was mismanagement at the highest levels?
Yes.
Perhaps there may have been some intentional foul play, including at the highest levels. What do you think?
I think it was a perfect storm of different things. One is LA has always had fires. It's a desert. I mean, that's why Hollywood came here. It's like it doesn't rain here, so they can film all the time. Like the temperature is great and the precipitation is always really low. So that is going to, of course, make it susceptible to wildfires. Very dry environment. And I think that there's just the inevitable that fires are going to happen here. But yes, there was massive mismanagement. We pay the highest taxes in the country, or one of the highest taxes in the country, especially in the areas that burned down, Pacific Palisades and stuff. How much tax they pay is unbelievable. Where does that tax go? A lot of it goes to social safety nets. So a lot of it goes to helping the dispossessed of our society. It's, California is kind of run like a lot of places in the Middle East, where it's like they have oil and a few super rich oil billionaires kind of fund everything in those areas. California has Silicon Valley and they have Hollywood, and there's so much money from that they take care of a lot of the people in California that aren't contributing, nearly as much. So the money's going to those kinds of things. It's also going to a lot of cronyism. It's going to people that run these charities that are supposed to be helping the homeless, but they don't actually help the homeless. They go down once a year to Skid Row for a photo op, but they have a lot of champagne brunches to raise money. And there was stuff that we knew could have been done. We know that the clearing the brush away, all the deadfall, that should have been done. If these insurance companies are pulling out left and right, as they were, a lot from Pacific Palisades, like 1,500 policies were dropped just last year, Pacific Palisades, they knew that it was susceptible. So why was this brush not cleared? I personally don't think it was, evil people like Gavin Newsom, twisting their mustache, hoping things burn down. I think that it's a mismanagement. I think we have people, it's like an affirmative action of incompetence in leadership across the country. So Gavin Newsom is someone who's deeply connected. He's Nancy Pelosi's nephew or something along those lines. Like he was just from this thing that it's a lot easier. And I taught in wealthy communities where these kids were not hard workers. They weren't particularly bright, but they got into really good colleges because they were well connected. And then I taught kids in the hood who were selling weed, and they were great salesmen. They were brilliant, but they didn't have those kinds of connections. But if they were born in Beverly Hills, they'd be a top engineer for Google. So we have this situation where it's a lot of, like it is in business, it's a lot of who you know, not what you know. And those are the people that are running things. So I think there's that. And then there's the element that's, controversial, but the DEI element, that California is deeply committed to this idea of diversity, equity, and inclusion. So let's make sure that the optics look like the people in charge are minorities. They could be women, they could be women of color, they could be LGBTQ. So let's get those people in these positions, because I get representation. I think it's nice. I think it's nice to see people in positions of power that look like you, and you go, okay, that makes it possible for me. I get that. I really do. But we need to get as close to a meritocracy as possible in these positions that are really important. You can't have a lifeguard get the job because of their immutable characteristics if they aren't good swimmers, because the job actually matters. And the same thing goes for running a city. The job actually matters, especially when something big happens. We saw this during COVID too. But when the fire department is all run by women or women of color, are they the best for the job? Maybe. Did they get the job because they're a woman? Probably. And so when the shit hits the fan and the job really matters, what do? We don't want a brain surgeon, Jack. We don't want a brain surgeon that's in their position, or a pilot who's in that position because of their immutable characteristics. We want the best one. Even if you're a hardcore anti-Semite, okay, if your mom needs a brain surgery, okay, and they say, all right, well, the best brain surgeon is this Jewish person. It's like, yeah, I don't care. I just want the best one for the job. And we know that in jobs that are important, but there's been this disconnect that these jobs actually matter and their performance actually matters, but it only arises during times of tragedy and during something that's really pressing, like an LA fire, like a pandemic. I think that's a lot of.
Well, I think William, I think it's a nice idea to want to include, other segments of society that may not typically occupy a certain position or a certain type of job and so on. But let's fucking face it. To be a good firefighter, you have to be able to lift people on your shoulder, to take them out of danger's way. And how does it make any sense for the fire chief to be someone who wasn't capable of, participating in a fire, understanding what's involved, having dealt with these emergency situations themselves? If they couldn't physically perform at the job, it didn't make any sense that they'd have the job of fire chief. And frankly, it's an insult to anyone who's occupied such a position and who's been able to actually make a difference and save people from harm's way, in real fires. So, that's a real shame.
Yeah,
now, Pacific Palisades, for those of you who don't know, is an absolute slice of paradise. It was my favorite part of Los Angeles. Why there? Well, we're wondering ourselves, why would most of the fires be concentrated in one of the most beautiful places in the United States? It doesn't make any sense. And mind you, so close to the fucking water, because you called LA a desert. But Pacific Palisades, abuts the Pacific Ocean. How is it that they weren't able to use that water? How is it that they didn't have the necessary water resources to protect, I think, 20,000 or so acres that make up Pacific Palisades? Doesn't make any sense whatsoever. Not that people should give a shit, but how many celebrities do you think lost their homes in the fire?
Oh, I think a lot of celebrities, a lot of the top achievers and tax earners of the city live there because it really was a slice of paradise. I mean, it's not. You go to certain areas, Bel Air, Beverly Hills, Newport Beach. It's very kind of like people are behind these big walls, and it's like not it's not like a neighborhood like you would think. But the flats of Pacific Palisades were, I mean, it was white picket fences. It was like quiet little towns where kids were riding their bikes on the street, and it was just overlooking the ocean. That's why people loved it, is it was like a community where people could see each other and see their houses. And I mean, there was elements of it. There were also people that had, the big walls and everything, but it wasn't the parts that really got decimated weren't those places. It was the flats. So why did it happen there? I don't think it was like targeted at the wealthy. I think that wouldn't make a lot of sense, but I do think that it was a mismanagement of everything around it, and then it just swept through. They weren't prepared, and they should have been prepared. They weren't paying attention. That's why I teach history. Those who don't remember history are doomed to repeat it. And I think that we knew that this was coming. The insurance companies knew. Everyone knew. They've been talking about this forever. Donald Trump was on Joe Rogan's podcast like 4 months ago saying, I can't believe that they're not clearing all this brush away. I don't know that's not the forests are mismanaged. Like, it's so dumb. There's going to be a big fire. And then sure enough, there's a big fire.
Do you think that this is a moment of reckoning for America, for California, for the Democratic elite, and for Hollywood and the wider entertainment industry?
I do.
I think that's a big question for you to answer.
I do. Yeah, I think that what happens is Hollywood elite are so isolated in their bubbles. They're surrounded by yes men. They're surrounded by just like, they can just walk right into Starbucks and move to the front of the line like, oh, Leonardo DiCaprio butted in front of me. Like their concept of reality is so warped. It's so crazy. When Will Smith gets up and smacks Chris Rock, and they all just sit there and let it happen, like, and then give him an Oscar and let him make a big speech about loving each other, like, they're not living a real life. And this smacked them in the face with reality. Like, it's hardship now. Because even if they have the money to rebuild, like, they lose important things. I interviewed a woman on my podcast about this, and she lost, wealthy woman, but she lost, like, her children's baby teeth. And, the little, like, decorations and science projects that they made when they're 7 years old, and now they're in their 20s. Like, all that stuff's gone. So I think that they're like, things are fine, things are okay. California's doing great because it's doing great for them. It's like, you can say that there's a drought, but I turn on my faucet and water comes pouring out. It's fine. But the day that you turn on the faucet and no water comes out, you go, oh, I guess there's a drought here. So it's like, you can have a lifeguard who's not a great swimmer, and they're there because of representation. Okay, but as soon as a kid's drowning and the lifeguard can't do their job, they go, oh, this is what people have been saying for a long time. I think that it's going to smack them in the face and realize that. And I think it could be a positive of it is it could start to shift them and say, like, I'm not going to vote blue no matter who, because these positions actually matter. So many times I've looked at the ballot, it's all Democrats. I'm an independent person. Like, I'm not against Democrats. But when you only have one party and they know that they can do anything and still keep your vote, we respond to incentives. I teach economics. We respond to incentives. And there's no incentive to get better if you know you're going to keep your job no matter what. But if people come down really hard on Karen Bass or on Gavin Newsom for this, or they get ousted from office and or something along those lines, then people are going to go, oh, I guess I have to deliver, and I can't just rely on their vote no matter what I do. Yeah, I hope it's a reckoning.
What you said was full of, political thought, but you mentioned one thing that was interesting. You said people lost, everything that they've built that was material, that had sentimental value, that they've held on to, since childhood, since, young adulthood and so on. How important do you think it is for people to keep and hold on to those items that don't necessarily have monetary value, but that they keep in their home for years, for decades. You know, the science project that they did when they were in elementary school. Mm-hmm. You know, that piece of clothing that they might have worn when they were a kid, maybe an old hat that they didn't want to throw away because it had sentimental value. Right. And that Game Boy from back in the 1990s that they might have been playing with, that they saved and held on to, that all of a sudden burns. It had no monetary value, but it was a connection to the past. It was a connection to your story, and now it's fucking gone. Yeah. How profound do you think that is?
I think that I talked to someone who was getting evacuated, and he's like, I'm going through this, wrestling this thing. Do I bring the valuable things, or do I bring the worthless shit that has value to me? And I was like, I think you bring the worthless shit that has value to you, because you can't replace it. You know, we can always earn more money. You know, it's hard, obviously, to make a lot of money, but you can do that. There are things that are irreplaceable, and I think that's, you know, we're another thing Jonathan Haidt says is our brain is a story processor, not a logic processor. Logic would say grab the cash and the gold or whatever, you know, the equivalent of gold, but we like stories. And there's not a lot of story behind something that just has value behind it. You know, the Lamborghini that you just bought 2 months ago doesn't have the same kind of story, typically, as, you know, the Game Boy that your kid just played and worked really hard on for years, and you just have all these funny stories about it. You know, like, that's the stuff that I think really wakes people up and helps them understand reality, because reality is more about the stories. I think we do understand our consciousness through story. You don't just see a dump truck driving down the road. You see a dump truck that's on its way to deliver something. It's on the way to build something. There's a whole kind of like a whole story around everything that we see. And that seems to be the way that human beings work. And I think when you take away those stories from people, that has a bigger impact than things that you can't rebuild. I do.
Do you think there is validity to what some of the conspiracy theorists are saying about the mismanagement, about the corporations seeing, financial opportunity in the hardship of others, you know, related to this LA fire?
I think that, I don't think Jeff Bezos and Mark Zuckerberg started COVID. Do I think that they pushed real hard on the government to keep things locked down so people spend more time online? Yeah, so the same thing goes for the fires. I don't think Gavin Newsom started the fire, but I think that if he sees that this is a way to make Los Angeles 2.0, which he's talking about now, I think it's like, all right, I'm gonna capitalize on this opportunity. So I think that it's much more of people who are connected with corporations who are trying to just raise shareholder value. That's their job, raise shareholder value. Okay, and when a tragedy strikes, they capitalize on it. They're not going to intentionally stop it, but again, people work with incentives. If you're a pharmaceutical company, where is your incentive to have people be healthy? It just doesn't make sense. And corporations, they're run by people, and people, you know, have incentives that might be more benevolent, but the corporation doesn't, and they're beholden to the corporation, because if they don't have the corporation doesn't raise their shareholder value continuously, infinite growth. You had the record profits last quarter. They're not like, cool, we can chill now. No, you have to keep going up, keep going up, keep going up. Okay, so individuals are incentivized to do whatever they need to do to keep that price going up. So they will go against their conscience, they will go against their morals to make sure that they keep their jobs, so that they can provide for their families, so they can maintain this lifestyle. I think that people are in this weird kind of thing where they're going against their morals, and they know they are, but it's easy to just kind of to play that off as, well, I have a job and I got to provide for a family. So I don't think that it was started or intentional, but I think that when it's there, they see opportunity. You know, when there's blood on the streets, buy real estate. And I think that they're like, hey, there's going to be blood on the streets? If there is, all right, let's go. I don't know if that led to them not doing the brush. I tend to not believe that. I think that I heard someone say that government is a lot more like Veep than it is House of Cards. That it's not a bunch of deeply immoral supervillains. It's a lot of idiots. And then those idiots are going to capitalize on opportunities that come up during tragedy. And I think that my opinion is that it's more of that than shooting space lasers to burn down these houses, or hiring arsonists to go start it and not doing the brush because they go, hey, if this all burns down, then we can capitalize. I think that it's more just looking for opportunities when they show up. I don't think they cause the blood to fill the streets. I think when there is blood on the streets, then they act very quickly to capitalize on it.
So you think that politics is more like Veep, the show Veep, than it is House of Cards? In other words, it's less about these evil, supervillains conspiring against, your average citizen, and more just a bunch of fucking idiots who have no clue what they're doing, who don't take the role of government seriously, and they're like, if there's a fire, then we'll come and somehow try and rescue everybody. But in the meantime, let's just do, the bare minimum.
I do. Yeah, I think it's called Hanlon's razor, which is you don't attribute to malice what could be explained through stupidity. I think that it's hard for the average citizen to go like, how are these people that are in charge doing all this terrible stuff? It's like they're not equipped. How did they get that job? I mean, in government, if you want to be a politician, you have to be a smooth talker. You're the popular kid in school. You're the one who's the popular kid in school is not the one who's gonna get all kinds of scholarships typically for their intellectual ability. It's the one who's a schmoozer. It's the one who's the good talker. That's also who's successful in a lot of businesses. A lot of business CEOs and stuff like that, they weren't great in school. You watch Shark Tank, they're all talking about how they were terrible in school. But they have charm. They're good at at certain things that are not so quantifiable. But it's a lot about a lot of business is about confidence. That's what con man is. You have a lot of confidence, and a lot of politicians, it's all about confidence. A lot of salespeople, it's all about confidence. They don't have to be the best. They just have a lot of confidence. And a lot of really smart people who could be the best don't have a lot of confidence because they're always questioning things, and they recognize that they might not be right. But politics is all about, I have the right answer, I can solve this, vote for me and I got this. And people go, oh, okay. People are attracted to confidence. That's what makes a great salesperson. I'm attracted to that confidence. So I think that's a lot more of what it is. Does that make sense?
And with regards to Donald Trump, do you think it's his confidence that attracts people, putting aside someone's opinion about his politics, whether someone supports him or doesn't support him? Do you think it's his confidence that attracts people, or do you think it's his implementation strategy? What is it about Donald Trump that attracts people?
Yeah, I mean, and he won. He won the popular vote too, which is rare for a Republican to win the popular vote. It's a couple of things. One is Barbara Corcoran, who's on Shark Tank. Worked with Donald Trump before. She said he's the best salesperson I've ever met. He's really good at sales. Okay, he is a schmoozer. I mean, he is really good. When you're in the room with him, I've never met him, but when you're in the room with him, so I hear, he just makes you feel like you're great and he's a great salesman. Okay. He talks about how he can be like the savior. He can fix all the problems that people are seeing in the world. He's really good at, saying, I'm like you. Even though he's, Manhattanite with gold toilets, a lot of people in Appalachia are like, okay, this guy's, representing me. I think that's part of it. And I do think that he's pushing back on a lot of the DEI, woke stuff that people have woken up to, no pun intended, as being bad. As being not good for our society. So he's willing to speak out about that. I think that he's bold in saying, like, I'll go in there. That we are attracted to confidence, which he has. He doesn't talk about like his screw ups. You rarely hear him say like, wow, I really screwed up. I really got that wrong. Okay, so people like that in leadership. He's always confident. And he's got that thing where he's like, I can solve this, and he's strong. Like he'll go into Putin and he'll look him in the eye, and he's not intimidated by anybody. He was dealing real estate in the 70s and 80s. That's all mob bosses and stuff like that. So he's been dealing with like literal mob boss killers his whole career, and that builds a tough skin. And look, when he was shot, okay, blood trickling down his ear, the fact that he said, I'm getting up, he pushed them away, stood up and said, fight, that's unbelievable. That is like, he's a tough guy. He's a tough guy. And when people are struggling because of inflation and all this stuff, they're like, I just need a tough leader who's going to protect me. That goes back to our evolution too. Like I want the alpha, the one who's running the pride, the one who's running the wolf pack to be the strong leader because strength makes us feel safe. So I think that in the past 4 years have not been easy for a lot of people, and we go towards someone who's strong because it makes us feel safe. And I think those are some of the reasons why Donald Trump won.
That is a brilliant, brilliant summary, William.